move your changes from your working area to the staging area. Then we also looked at how you can restore your files, like once you move the data to the staging area, how you can get that data back. We looked at that as well. We also looked at how you can revert your changes, like let's say you have made some changes and the data is there in the working area, but now you no longer want that for some reason. You don't want that, right? So how you can discard those changes, how you can revert, basically how you can go back to the previous version of the file. We looked at that. Then we also looked at how you can. Oh, then we also looked at limiting your log output, how you can check your commit history, how you can check the changes that you have, how you can review those changes. We looked at 1 minute, Rukshan. Sorry, Prokshit. Uh, yeah. So, okay. So, let me go back here. Right. So we also looked at how you can limit your log output and all those things. The next thing we are going to look at is working with remotes. Now, in one of the previous session, there was a question: how do we sorry, how do we so we have a central repository which we can clone, and we can make changes to it, and you can push it. Now, what if it's a local repository that we have created using what is that, git init command? Right, so git init is basically when you uh, don't have any history of it, right? So now what do we do in that case? How do we push that to your central repository? So we are going to talk a bit about that, how you can do that. All right. So moment, I need to. Okay, while that comes up. So now, see, when we do a push or so, here in now we are going to basically look at how you can push your changes to the central repository. Okay. Now, before, when we push our changes to the central repository, your Git, it needs to understand that, okay, it has to push your changes to, let's say, a particular central repository. Like, for example, let's say in your GitHub account, like in my case, if you see here, I have so many repositories, right? So I have these many repositories that are available.
Rabi,
Now,
are you sharing a screen?
yeah, I am. One moment, sorry. You're able to see now?
Yeah.
Okay. So now here, if you have to see, I have so many repositories, right? So all of these are for different purposes. Now, how does your Git know when I'm pushing my changes? How does your Git know that, okay, it has to push my change to this repo or to this repo or to this repo or to any of these repo? How does your Git know that it has to push your changes to this particular repo? Now that's where your remote references comes in. All right. So remote references can be used to uh, specify or tell your Git, the tool, that, okay, hey, this changes, please push it to this particular repository. So to be able to collaborate on any Git project, you will need to know how to work with your remote repository. So you need to understand how in the backend what exactly it is doing and how it is working. So remote repositories are versions of your projects that are hosted on the internet or somewhere. So remote repositories, these are nothing but your central repositories that you're talking about. Now you can have several of them, right? So here we can have several of them, and each of them, which is generally either read only and read or write for you. So either it will be a read only repository, or it will be a read or write repository, depending on the type of repository that you have created. Now, managing remote repositories includes knowing how to add remote repositories, remove repositories that are no longer valid, manage various remote branches, and define them as being tracked or not. So first, we will look at how you can show your remote repositories. Now, depending on how you created your repo, that is, did you use Git init, or did you use Git clone? What did you use? Depending on that, your remote reference will be available for you. So let me quickly log into this server over here. Now I'm going to create two repos. One is by using the git init command and the other is by using the git clone command. So git clone for this one. Okay, so let me do a git clone. So git clone and then the URL, and then I'll also say git init, and let's say we'll call this as init local repo. So I have two repositories. So this one I created by using git clone and this one by using the git init command. Now let me also set my username and email ID. I'm doing this again because it's a new server. I don't have the details here. Okay. Now, to show your remote references, if you want to see if there are any remote references in your repo. So to see which remote servers you have configured, you can run this git remote command. So this will list the short names of each remote handle you have specified. So if I go to this repo which I did a git clone on, if I run this command git remote, you should be able to see one default name, which is your origin. By default, you will find a name with the name origin. This is only if you have done git clone. Now, let me go back to this repo, which I created using the git init command. Right now here, let me run this git remote command. If you see, this is giving me a empty response. So if you have cloned your repository, you'll always find a remote reference to it. And this is the default name. Always, whenever you have done a git clone, you will find this name origin. And if you have created your repo using the git init command, you will not find a remote reference name. By default, you will not have it. You'll have to create it manually. All right. So if you have cloned your repository, you should at least see origin. And this is a default name that Git gives to the server you have cloned from. So this name, this is now pointing to this repo in the central repository. So this is an alias name. All right. This is for us to easily remember the name. All right. So you can also specify this -v flag, which will show you the URL. So now see this is basically pointing to your central repository, which is a URL, right? So here in my case, here this is a URL. But imagine we have 50 repositories. Now remembering the URL can be difficult. It can be challenging, right? So that's where we get this alias name for us to easily work with it. So if you run this git remote -v command, it will show you the URL that it is pointing to. So now in my case, if I'm going to run this in the repo, which I created by using git init command, you see I'm getting an empty output. But if I run this in the other repo, git remote, sorry, remote -v, you will see that it will show you. So this alias name that we have, it will show you to which URL it is pointing to. Right, so you can see it is pointing to this particular GitHub repo for us. Make sense?
Yes, Ravi.
ಏನೆಲ್ಲ ಆಗಿದೆ ನನಗೆ ಕೊಂಚ ವೇಳೆ ಇರ್ತಿದೆ ಅಮ್ಮ ಕೂಡ ಆಡ್ಕೋ one moment, Prakshit.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Prokshit.
No
Uh,
problem.
yeah, my son is needs little attention. So sorry about that. Okay, so we've looked at how you can list your remote references. Now, the next thing we are going to look at is how you can add your remote references. Now, adding the remote references, you will unless you're if you're using git clone, you don't really have to worry about this. But if you're using the git init command, you will need this. You will need to do this. Okay, so um, to add a new git remote reference as a short name you can easily reference, then you can use this particular command. Now let's say, for example, you don't want this name, this origin that you see, you don't want it. Maybe you want something else, you want your own customized version of it. You can go ahead and change it. You can go ahead and delete this and add a new one. All those things is possible. Let's say, for example, I don't want this name, I want something else. So you can use this particular command. So git remote add the short name that you want to use and to which URL it is going to point. So here I'll say git remote add and let's say Rabi. All right, and then the URL to which URL you want to point to. So this URL. All right. So what this will do, this will add a new remote reference for us. So here you see now I have a remote reference. So this is a short name that I've created, an alias name that I've created, and it is pointing to this URL. By default, you will have this origin name. And again, like I said, 99.99% of the time we don't mess around with this unless you want you're very peculiar about it, you're very specific about it. Now, in case of your init command, you will have to do this, right? So here I can say git remote add and whatever name, let's say we'll go with that only. Now you'll also need to have the URL, right? Now for the URL, you will have to create a new repo for that, right? So you need to have a URL, or if you want to you any existing repo, you can do that also. But generally, you'll always have like a new repo that you will be creating for this. So something like, let's say, I can use the same name if you want, just to avoid confusion. I'll use the same name and then click on create repo. And this will have a URL for me, right? So I have this URL and I can provide that over here. So now you'll see I have the remote reference. So this is for the init. So if you have created your local repository using the init command, you will need to do this. You will need to do this additional step. But if you have done using git clone, you don't have to worry about it. By default, you'll have the origin name over it. Okay. So now you can use the string name. So whatever the short name you have used, right? You can use that in place of the whole URL. So instead of telling git push and then the URL, instead of doing this, I can simply say git push origin. So in the backend, what happens is your git will replace this alias name with the actual URL and then push it to that particular URL. That's where your remote references comes into the picture. Questions?
It basically acts as in alias command. I mean alias the
Yes.
shortcut.
Yes.
Got
Yeah. So everywhere you will see people using something like git pull origin or something like git push origin. So essentially they're pointing to a URL. All right. But it can be difficult for us to remember the URL or type in the entire URL. Right. That can be difficult. So we are
Correct.
just using an alias name for it. That's it. And by default, you'll have origin as the alias name. Any other questions?
So inside the repository, can we create another sub repository, and then for that also can we give alias?
No.
Okay.
You can have subfolders, but it's part of one repository. You cannot have a sub repository, a repository inside another repository. That is not possible.
Okay. Okay.
It's always going to be one single repository. That's it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Now the next thing we are going to look at is pulling from your remote references. Now to get data from remote projects, you can run this below command. So you have two commands. One is your git fetch command and the other is your git pull command. Now, see, we are working with your central repository, right? So we have this central repository. Now, central repository is something that is being used by multiple people, right? So there are like so many people, like in a team, let's say have 10 people. Now 10 people, they will be pushing on, they'll be complete, always updating this central repository. Now you may want to know about it at some point of time. You want to know whether your central repository is updated or not, or if there are any new changes in the central repository or not. Then obviously you can go to the GitHub and you can get to know that. But if you want to do that from your local machine, that's where you have this git fetch command. So to get the data from the remote projects, you can run this command. So this command goes out to that remote project that you've specified and pulls down all the data from that remote project that you do not have yet. So basically what this will do is, this will go to the central repository. Any new changes that you have in the central repository, it will get the information about that and let you know about, like, okay, these are the changes we have in the central repository. Now let's say I will go over here, and at this point I will run this git pull, and I'll say git pull origin. So essentially I'm using this remote alias name route. So now I'll run this command, and at this point you see it says already up to date. So essentially this is comparing my local repository with the central repository, and it is seeing if there are any changes between the two repositories. Right now, let's say I will make some changes in the central repository. Okay, so let's say I'll add one more file just for the sake of example. So let's say I'll add what can I add? Let's add a Jenkins file. Okay, just for the sake of example. So let's say this is a test file for Jenkins, and we will commit this changes. So now we have some changes in the central repository. Assume this was done by someone else. Maybe you did it. Let's say, for example. Now, I want to know whether now there are any new changes or not. So, sorry, I did a git pull, right? Sorry, I should have done a git fetch. So, git fetch, and now you will see that it is able to find a change. Right? So, this one that you see over here, this is a commit ID and the branch on which branch the change was done. So, if I take this and if I go and check over here, you see this? So git fetch can be used whenever you want to check if there are any new changes in the central repository. If you want to get information about that, we can make use of your git fetch command. So essentially here you're doing a comparison between what you have in your local repository and then what you have in the central repository. Questions?
Okay. No questions.
After you do this, you should have references to all the branches from that remote, which you can merge in, out, inspect at any time. So basically, now you have a reference of what all changes you have in the remote repository, right? And if you want, you can pull it. If you clone a repository, the command automatically adds the remote repository under the name origin. So git fetch origin fetches any new work that has been pushed to the server since you cloned them. So let's say you cloned this repository yesterday. Now, starting from yesterday till now, any new changes you have, if you want to know about that, I can make use of the git fetch command. Now, it is important to note that git fetch command only downloads the data to your local repository. It does not automatically merge it with any of your work or modify what you're currently working on. So, whatever you currently have in your local repository, it will not change any of those things. It will not merge. So now here, if you see, I have this new file, but I still don't have it in my local repository, right? So it will not merge. It will not make any changes in a local repository. Whatever you're doing in the local repository, you can continue doing that. It will not have any impact on your changes that you're doing. You have to merge it manually into your work when you are ready. So there's a separate command for that. Now, if you decide that, hey, I want the change, the new change that you have, I want that change in my local repo. Now there's a separate command for that. So for that, you can make use of your git pull command. So you can also use the git pull command to automatically fetch and then merge that remote branch into your current branch. So please, understand this differences. This can be a common interview question. So you have the git fetch command and then you have the git pull command. All right. Now, git fetch will only tell the new changes in the central repository. Okay, it will not download those changes, it will not merge those changes. Now git pull will tell the new changes in the central repo and download and merge those changes in the local repo. So this will also do git fetch, but in addition to that, it will also download that and merge it in your local repo. So basically, it will make changes in your local repo. So now I have this change, right? So now let me do it. Let me go ahead and do a git pull. I'll go and do a git pull origin, and you can see here updating. So you can see the commit ID. Fast forward Jenkins file. There's one change. So one file changed, one insertion, create mode Jenkins file. So now I should have that file in my local repo. So whatever we had in the central repository, now I have it in my local repository as well. That's your git pull. So at any point, if you want to update your local repository, like for example, one use case I can give you is, let's say we both are working in the same team, but let's say you're working in the US hours and I'm working during the IST hours. Now I start working during the IST hours, I'll make some changes and I'll push it to the central repo. Now you will start during the US hours and you're also working with the same file with the same repository and let's say you updated things. Now the next day when I start, I want to make sure that my repo is up to date, meaning whatever the new changes you have done, I should have those changes in my local repo. That's where I can make use of your git pull command.
Got it.
Questions?
Yeah, like now, like, we fetched, like, we pulled the, like, the data from, like, the central repo to the local. So where can we find that, like, Jenkins file? I mean, the file which we created, like, if I want to find it on the local machine, so how do I find it?
There.
Okay. Okay.
It's inside your repo.
Okay.
The local repo, inside the local repository.
Okay.
So if you open up this file, you should be able to see the same data.
Okay.
So the git clone command by default sets up the local master branch to track the remote master branch of the server you clone from. Running the git pull generally fetches the data from the server you originally cloned from and automatically tries to merge it into your code you're currently working on. So, essentially it is branch to branch. Whatever you have in your main branch or your master branch, the same thing will be updated in your local main branch or your master branch. Questions?
No.
Right. 1 minute. Let's see. Okay, pushing I'll show you tomorrow. Let me just cover this one topic, which is your inspecting a remote. Now, if you want to see more information about a particular remote, like you have your remote repository in your local repo, right? If you want to see more information about that, you can make use of this git remote show and the name. So here, if I run this git remote show and the name, this will essentially show me more information about it. So when I do a fetch to which URL it is pointing to, when I do a push to which URL it is pointing to which branch it is pointing to, and the remote branch in the central repository, which branch it is tracking, in the local machine when I do a git pull, which branch it is looking at, when I do a git push, which branch it is looking at. So essentially you will get more details about it. That's it. Again, we generally don't look at it, but at any point, if you want to see, like, hey, what remote branch are you tracking, or on the local machine, which branch are you looking at? For that, we can make use of this git remote show origin command. So it will just show that more details about your repo.
Okay, got it.
Now, next you have this renaming and removing remotes. Now, one option you have is adding new names, right? So here, one option you have is adding this new name. You also have the option of renaming a repo. So you can run this git remote rename to change a remote's short name. Like For example, let's say you want to use this particular name. All right. You want to change this. Maybe you want to use some other name now. You don't want this name or anything like, instead of creating a new one, you just want to rename it. So I can make use of this git remote rename command. So for instance, if you want to rename test to new name, you can do so with this particular command, git remote rename command. Yes, so I can simply run this command, git remote rename your old name and the new name that you want to use. So here I can say this git remote rename origin to, let's say, new origin. I mean, essentially you can use whatever name you want. Okay, so now my remote branch has been updated. And now what I can do is I can do this command. So I can say git pull and the new name that I have used, right? I can do this. Hence,
Yeah, no, yeah, all good.
and I'll stop here. Prakshit will continue tomorrow.
Ravi, one question. So, like, if we want to change the urgency, origin link is already linked, right? Like, we're fetching some data from the link. So, what if
Yes.
we want to change the link itself, like, some other repository?
Yeah. So for that, you have this command. So here, if you look at the help, it will show you the command. So you can see this uh, set URL. So here, these are the commands you'll be using for that. So git remote set -URL, the new URL, right? So name and the new URL. That's it.
Okay, got it.
Or git remote set URL add name and the new URL. So you have commands. So basically, this set URL is what you'll be using for that.
Okay, got it.
All right. So we'll continue tomorrow then.
Okay, thanks, Ravi. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.